Thanks for joining AHA with Amplify. We're really thrilled that you've come on the Monday after the long weekend to join us for some learning. It's a great topic we have today. We're going to talk about that intersection between sales and finance and accounting. And sometimes there's a tug of war between the two groups, but at the end of the day, we're all here to grow our businesses. So I'm really, really excited that we have Carrie here to join us. And I'll pass it to her to tell you more in a minute. But before we get into that, there's lots happening. You might have gotten my email yesterday on Families Day. There's so much going on. I'm really excited and I'm thankful that there is lots going on because I don't have a trip planned and I'm sick and tired of this cold weather. So at least we have Amplify things to look forward to, including this morning and lunch with you. But coming up, in addition, the end of the month, we have a live with AHA, and these are always sell out. We just recently started opening it to the public. Amplify seats are actually already sold out, but we're dipping into Always Beyond's seats as well. And so there's a few left, and we would love it if you could attend. We're doing modern technology. We've got the Always Beyond crew coming. So Sean and Julian and Phil are talking about automation, modern tech in Office 365, and cybersecurity. So really, really important topics. In addition, we've got some amplifiers helping out. And we're going to talk about system selection, so how to pick the next tech or ERP system that is going to help your business grow. We're going to talk about growing your business with those systems and those ERPs and how to have post-go live success. And we're also going to talk about IT projects and implementation success. So we've got Danny and me doing system selection, and Xavier and Amanda doing growing your business, and Foma and David on the project and implementation success. So no shortage of great topics, great CPD, of course, food, drink, and networking too. So make sure you register for that because I do anticipate it'll sell out easily this week, if not today or tomorrow. So very few seats are left, and it is limited seating because of the roundtable learning experience that we're doing. I'm going to hijack today again. I am hosting an MPAC reunion with my friend Karen, who did last month's AHA. This is not an Amplify event, and I apologize to all the amplifiers that I'm taking over for 2 seconds. But all 2003, 2004, and 2005 UFI writers are welcome. We are doing a reunion to connect with all of us. It's been 20 years since we've been CPAs. I know it looks like it's been 5 years. We're all so young looking, but it's been 20 years that we've been considered professionals, which is absolutely ridiculous and worth celebrating. So that is not an Amplify event, but it is something that my friend Karen is hosting, and I'm trying to help, and I'm really excited about. And I can't wait to see some of you that I haven't seen in years and find out how many kids you've had and how many jobs and what the hell is going on. In addition, we are doing a demo. So Acumatica is one of the softwares that we partner with. And so we're really thrilled to have a lunch and learn on March 6th, where we are going to show you construction, energy services, professional services, and the project side of Acumatica. As most of you know, one of the reasons that we decided to also partner with Acumatica, which is an emerging ERP, is because of how great they do in the project area. So sadly, when we were only a NetSuite partner, we were losing to Acumatica when the company was project oriented. So construction, energy services, professional services. And Jesse and I don't like to lose, so we decided to partner with Acumatica so that now we can win those too. It's also great for many other industries, but this March 6th Lunch and Learn is specifically going to show you the project areas of Acumatica. So I think it'll be relevant, practical, and you can see how sexy this software really is. So please do join us for that. That's all I'm going to talk about. Obviously, next month, third Tuesday of the month, just like you're here with us today, I hope you'll join us on a strategy session. And we're really excited to have a friend of David's come and talk to us about strategy. Every year, we try and talk about strategy at least once because it needs to be top of mind, and it is the fuel that grows all of our businesses. So that's next month on the third Tuesday in a webinar session. So enough from me and enough from Amplify. Let's talk to Carrie and do some learning together.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. It sounds like you have so many exciting things going on. So I'm glad to be part of the landscape there. So first, check-in question. Can you see my screen?
We're good. We're good.
Okay,
I'll
excellent,
be back
excellent.
when it's time for questions. Everybody, we're going to do questions and answers throughout the whole thing. So
Yeah.
put them in the chat and I'll facilitate with Carrie when she takes a break. And in the meantime, I'll get off my face so you guys can.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I'm super excited about this topic because I, of course, am very passionate about sales. I'll give you a bit of my background in a moment. But the idea of investing in sales is a great perspective to take because often we look at some of the things that salespeople spend their time and money on and think it's a cost or an expense. And while that is true from a budget point of view, when we look at the outcome of the efforts that go into it, it really should be an investment and receive some ROI. So again, my name is Carrie Tuttle. And so a little bit of my background. I have worked with many brands. I won't put them all on the screen, but my background is in marketing and sales. So I am a Calgary girl. I went to the U of C Haskayne School of Business before it was even called the Haskayne School of Business. And I've been in sales and leadership roles for more than 20 years, and then also in coaching and consulting capacities. So here's some of the brands that have trusted me in the last 7 years. I've had my own company, which I called Team Mojo, partly because I support sales and marketing teams that are looking for alignment, as well as that has translated into sales and finance teams that are looking for alignment in how they work. And so we're going to get into some of those topics today. You might wonder about the picture. Here I am standing on the glass floor, of course, in the Calgary Tower. And the reason this is relevant is that this represents me facing my fears. I'm afraid of heights. I get very nervous and I get vertigo when I'm in a heights situation. I was brave enough in a moment after this photo was taken to step across and grab onto the handle and look down. This is relevant because in sales, we need to face our fears every single day. Our parents told us when we were children, don't talk to strangers. And in sales, our entire job is to talk to strangers. So you can imagine how fear plays into the things that we're asked to do every day and something that we need to face. So I don't want to go through the agenda necessarily, but I know our objective today was really to talk about that battle between what's going on the cost control side of things and then people who are driving that top line revenue. And so we had a few questions that Jamie kind of helped formulate. And I think where we want to start though is to talk about what is sales and most importantly, what sales is not. So stereotypes have us believe back in the day, this is that used car sales lot where we have salespeople who are not necessarily authentic and they're telling us things that we want to hear and we aren't necessarily getting the truth. And this is the stereotype that still exists today for salespeople, and they are up against this all the time. When they pick up the phone and call a prospect, the prospect is expecting that they're going to be sold something, and people don't like to be sold to. However, they do like to buy stuff, right? We all like to buy stuff. But this stereotype is something that salespeople are constantly battling against, and it plays into the emotional side of the job. And I think this is important to understand going into when we think about investments and what they need to be successful in their role. So let's then talk about what sales is. Sales is serving others, educating, right? We're solving problems for people. And I know in my own history, I worked for a market research firm early on in my career, and I had this mental thought that I had to get over that selling is asking for people's money when in fact, businesses could save money by investing in the research that we were providing because they would find out whether or not all of the money they were spending in training their salespeople and delivering good service was actually being used in the front lines. So our research went in and tested how effectively they were executing on that. And so that gave me, when I made that mental shift of I'm serving, I'm actually helping people, it made me feel like if I don't reach out to these people, I'm actually doing them a disservice because their business could be suffering and I know that I can help them. And so I would question as business leaders if your salespeople feel that way about your service or your product. Because if they don't believe that they're making people's lives better at the end of the day, then either they're uneducated or have the wrong perspective, or maybe you have the wrong people in place. So I would challenge you to find out how your salespeople feel about your product and service. Um, the other perspective I would take here is that, or challenge you on, is that every person in the company is actually in sales. We all represent our company, whether it's, the frontline person answering a phone, if you still have a human answering the phone, if it's installers, if it's estimators, if it's service techs, whatever the role is, everybody's actually in sales. I mean, I think we all have a story of where we had maybe a furniture delivered to our house and the delivery person was rude and disrespectful of our home and caused us to feel badly about the company that we bought from. So we need to make sure that at every stage of the customer journey that they're having a positive experience. And really that's part of sales, right? The delivery is as much part of sales as the first person who reaches out to get us interested in the product. Okay, and then the emotional piece. So I mentioned the calling of strangers. Also, the emotional piece, which you might be very aware of, is this idea of rejection. Every time we go into a sales meeting, there's a chance that we could be rejected. And we're always told, don't take it personally. It's about the product or it's about the service. It's not about you. But we can't help it. Most sales professionals will definitely take it personally because they believe that they've invested in a relationship and they've established rapport and they have trust. So why didn't they buy from me? Why didn't they give me the deal? And so there's all the reasons that you're going to hear like, well, our price was too high, or oh, our delivery wasn't fast enough, or oh, our service wasn't 24/7. And that's what they wanted. That's all true. That could be true, but they're still going to probably take it somewhat personally. And so that emotional aspect plays into the job. So the next piece that goes along with this is the sales activities, because we all know if you've seen Jerry Maguire, people focus on the closing, right? Show me the money. And closing is what gets the money as far as compensation. Sales professionals are often incented on like a commission structure or a bonus structure. But there are a lot of activities that go into closing a deal that don't directly relate to that commission or that close. So, in fact, I've listed, I don't even know how many, I didn't actually count, but probably 25 activities here, including things like demos, the cold outreach, right? Like the initial gaining awareness or interest in your product or service, generating content that will help uh, get get someone to click or download something or reach out in some way. And I'm sure you're probably thinking some of these are for the marketing department to do, not for the sales department. That might be true, and there might be a shared responsibility, but also the salespeople need to be sharing it, posting it on social, sending it out to their prospects, perhaps in the form of an email, or translating the same consistent message in the words that they use. Because if sales and marketing are not consistent in how they work and how they approach prospects, there's going to be confusion in the marketplace. And so this is a big challenge that I help companies with, is to create that consistency, and then it translates into all of these activities, things like lunch and learns or It might be trial memberships or trial use of your product. And I apologize if I'm being general. All of you have different organizations, so I have to generalize a little bit, but I'm going to try and share some stories throughout that will help illustrate some of the points, and then you can translate that into your world. So this is not an exhaustive list of the things that salespeople have to do, but everything in black is the stuff they do before they're asking for a check. Everything in green translates directly to money. So there's actually very few activities they do that you can go, yeah, they did that, and we got this money. So that's something to keep in mind and just be aware of. All right, so this is kind of a little funny. Salespeople do definitely get hassled or joked, kind of ribbed for taking days off or going like golfing in the Friday afternoon or something like that. And there's that optics of when you're not in the office, you're not working. And that shouldn't be true for a sales team. Definitely, they should be out with customers. They shouldn't be in the office very much. But as we saw on the previous slide, and in fact, I'll go back, some of those activities that are on there are not client facing, right? Updating the CRM or the client relationship management software so that we have activity reports and we know what they're doing. Those are not client facing, right? And they take a lot of time. Things like internal meetings, right? Coordinating with other teams to find out delivery timelines or when clients will get communication back. All of those activities are not client facing. And so it sometimes looks when they take time off that they don't do anything. They're never here. But in fact, that's not the case. They're usually thinking about it, even in the evening, on holidays, etc. And you might respect their time off. Don't get me wrong. You guys are all, business leaders who respect that everyone needs a day off. But clients often won't. I had a seller that I was working with in renewable resources, and this person had a random day off on a Tuesday to be with their family, got a call from a prospect, and said to the prospect, great question. I'm going to get an answer back to you tomorrow morning. I'm with my family today. And the client simply said, if you don't want to lose the deal, you'll get back to me today. So back to the emotional part of the job. I don't know many people who wouldn't be shaking a little bit and like, ooh, what do I do? And yet this is it's kind of the other extreme to the idea of you're taking time off and you're golfing, but it definitely illustrates that clients don't always respect that you need that time. So why don't we pause there, and Jamie, you can share some questions and where you would like to take the conversation next.
Perfect. So if anyone has questions, make sure you put it in the chat and I'll make sure to ask Carrie, but I've got a couple already. I
Okay.
did want to comment that your picture made me uncomfortable too. So it's funny that it was
Yeah.
actually a picture of being uncomfortable with the height. That's awesome. And it's a great analogy because, as we hire salespeople, and I'm an expert at hiring finance and accounting experts, but certainly not an expert at hiring salespeople. But one of the things I always talk about is that rejection and whether people are going to be ready for it, because it's a big part of the job and it's going to happen so often, right? So that fear of rejection and the fear of heights is an awesome analogy. So thank you for sharing that. So the value and not being sleazy, I want to talk a bit about that, where people are often have this negative connotation to sales. It can be negative on the receiving side, like you said. They don't want to be sold to. They don't want to pick up that cold call and be sold to. But also people who are starting in sales jobs or being expected to have sales as an additive to their other role. It can be tough, right? That concept of like being sleazy or pushy or all those
Mhm.
stereotypes of sales. But I think that you said it really great, is that obviously it's about providing the value and making sure that you're helping people, and that
Mhm.
ultimately, if you want to get really idealistic, why do you work at a company, let alone have a sales job, if you don't think that what you're providing to the community and to the market is helping people and is providing value? Whatever job you have, one would hope that you can align and respect the product or service that is ultimately paying your payroll. But it's a hard thing for people to really grasp. And I'm curious to know, when you're talking to people, especially outside the sales department, and you're trying to help them grow and help them have more sales across the whole company, how do you help them understand that it's about providing value and about helping, which you were talking about before, but just to go a bit deeper on that?
Yeah, definitely. No, I appreciate that. I think what we tend to get really excited about internally is the features and products or features and benefits of the product that we offer. So we get really excited about the bells and whistles and all the cool stuff that it can do, especially if we're in like the tech industry. And we're like, yeah, it can bring in AI and it can produce a selling sell sheet for your website in 3 minutes flat or less, right? Probably less. And that's cool, but what does that mean for the client? And by the way, do they care? Because the thing that we get really excited about is sometimes something that is like, oh, okay, that's nice. And we're wondering, why is my prospect not like super excited and like drooling over this and lining up to buy it? Well, it may not resonate with them as much. And so, as an organization, if we all believe that we have value and we all believe we are sellers and represent our company in the marketplace, we have to be aligned on what is the value story, right? So this is part of, and we'll talk about process in a moment, but when we talk about aligning, initially it might be sales and marketing, and then looping in the rest of the organization. At least that's how I approach it. Is what are the words that our prospects use or our clients use to describe what we do to make their life better? So, not the thing they're buying, but what is the end result of how it's going to make their life better? That is what we need to focus on. Because, and I do this even when I describe what I do, which I didn't do it because I'm not trying to sell you guys anything. I didn't do it in that way, but I tell people all the time, I help business owners scale their organization so that they can sell for a multiple, which they define, not me,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so when we do it in that way, people go, I get it. When we spit out features and benefits, like sort of robotic, like they told me to say these 5 features. And so then, we sound like we're scripted. And that's where we go back to the slimy, inauthentic sales pitch. And we've all experienced it, right? Like we get the phone call from the telecom company and they're reading paragraphs of script to us before they even pause to let us say anything. And we're
Yeah.
like, oh, please, when can I tell you that I need to hang up? Because we don't want to be sold to. So, and I didn't say this either, but I also do sales training. And so for my clients who I'm training with, it's always down to it's almost like the love factor. What do clients love about you? What makes them want to recommend you? What makes them want to come back? And if you don't know, go ask.
Right. And I think well, it's similar to that MVP theory of, like, especially for tech companies, where you don't want to be too perfect in your script or your approach,
Right.
because you need to be open to the feedback. And I think um, what I'm hearing from you too is that feedback, those words that are actually being used and that value that's actually being experienced,
Hmm.
as a salesperson or a marketing person, you might have to go talk to the people that are actually delivering the product or service, and make
Yeah.
sure that you've got that feedback circle within your institution, so that you're not just spouting out a script or whatever it is that the marketing and salespeople think is valuable, because the best thing to spout out is what people are actually saying is valuable when they're
That's right.
actually using that product or using that service. So I love that for sure. So we've got a question about, what are your thoughts on helping sales folks focus on profitable revenue and customers versus just high effort, low margin customers? So this is a classic question. Of course, this particular person asking is an accountant, and it is frustrating for us when we sit in the finance and accounting seat and we see like contract after contract after contract coming through and celebration and celebration and celebration coming through. But these
Mhm.
are all like low margin, high effort, like
Yeah.
high effort cradle to grave, usually like hard to sell to sometimes, hard to service, and never really any chance to upsell. So,
Mhm.
you see these contracts coming in, they're low margin. Sometimes it actually costs money to even serve them, as opposed to those profitable clients where the revenue is good, the experience is good for the salespeople and the delivery people. And,
Mhm.
and it's tough because sometimes some organizations, the sales people don't even have that information, which I think is like question number one, I would say to a CFO
Mhm.
or a finance leader who's frustrated by this is like, what makes you think that your salespeople even know that these are high volume, low margin, high effort clients? For all they know,
Mhm.
it's exactly what they've been told to go after, and they don't know the difference. So first
Yeah.
and foremost, is that transparency there? Is that education there? So I'm going to do one answer, but what's your answer on that, Carrie?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many layers to this question. So, depending on the size of the organization, you might have one salesperson, right? And they're defining what their process is as they go along because they've been told, go sell. And I can't tell you how many organizations, like you guys are awesome with the CPA. Everybody knows what that means to be a CPA, right? Like you have certain things that you're trained on, right? And even business leaders, if we think of leadership, we know that we're supposed to give our team vision, we're supposed to give them some structure, tools, all of those things have to be in place. Salespeople are often just told, go sell. And there's no, I consider it a profession, but and lots of people do. But there's not an association, there's no real like structure that's agreed upon of what that should look like. But here's some I guess universal truths that I think most people would agree on. One, you need to be very clear in defining who are we going after? What is their profile? And you probably have more than one, right? There's not just one ideal client profile, which you hear that all the time, ICP. So that's what that stands for. When we create a profile, it has a lot of different elements. It might have geography, there might be demographics like the buyer might always be a CFO, or the buyer might always be an HR, like, whatever that role is. Size of the organization based on either revenue or number of employees or number of sites, like location, actual physical locations. So there's that. And then there's also psychographics. So what do they think about? How do they think? For a B2B, it tends to be a little less about psychographics because there's not just usually one buyer. It's multiple decision makers within the organization. And so when we clearly define what that looks like, it makes it easier for our sales rep to sell and for the business to know how to handle that client once it gets signed, once it comes in the door. Um, then there also needs to be a process agreed upon. How are we going to sell? And so I have a couple of graphics, but I won't share that now. Um, Actually, maybe I will. Yeah. Do you
Sounds
mind
good.
if I just share
Yeah,
quickly? I'll
definitely.
share my screen. Um, so yeah. So here, this is first I'll share the approach on building a sales process. The first thing we want to do is look at it from the client's point of view. So map out when a buyer first says hello or first sees something that we have in the marketplace, what is their journey from there, from awareness all the way to like agreeing that they have a need to considering working with us or someone else. And then finally, along the line to purchasing. And then actually there's post-sales service that would go into that too. So it doesn't actually stop at purchasing, but for simplicity's sake, we'll kind of stop there. And we wanted to find what are the checkpoints along the way. So what other teams need to be involved, both on the buyer's side and on ours. So for some of our buyers, they're going to have a legal review. They're going to have maybe a finance or accounting review. They may have training internally that they need for their staff to be able to use our service. So for like, there's a company I work with that does essentially like valves and actuators in the energy industry, as well as like utilities and things like that. They, their staff, the customer, let me make that clear, the customer's staff need to be trained on how to install, service, and inspect that on an ongoing basis after it's purchased. So there's a lot of needs that they might have. And then on our side, we might have to coordinate with internal teams. There might be engineering, there might be operations, whatever that looks like, finance, legal. And so being really clear about what that looks like rather than just kind of running around with the chicken with our head cut off, which is what some salespeople end up doing. And some are really good at it and can get all the resources on at the table that they need to be able to implement a great solution for the client. Others aren't so good at it. So having process will help them be more effective. And then what does that handoff look like? So some sales reps are hired simply to get a deal, close it, and then pass it off to an account manager or somebody who manages that relationship on an ongoing basis. So making sure that that handoff is really smooth. And then also looking at mitigating risks. And I'm not talking risks that might happen 1% of the time, talking about something that's probable and happens frequently. So real risks. So we want to make sure that those are factored into it. So you asked me about how long it takes to build a process, and we'll talk about building the team as well. But it's variable, but I would say the process itself, you could probably build in 3 to 8 weeks. I'm working with a company right now where it's probably going to take about 4 weeks to build the process. But then we have using it, adopting it, and then enforcing it and making that change from we did it this way to now we're going to do it this way, this new way. And we might all agree that that's actually a better way, but changing the habit doesn't happen overnight. So I'll give you an example. When I worked for the market research firm, we worked for one of the major telecom companies, and everybody's bought a cell phone before. So you go into the store, or in the old days you did, now you can just order online, but you go into the store, talk to the sales rep, and they would show you the physical handset, right? You would see models of the cell phone. And when we did our research, we were evaluating, are the sales reps asking about your needs? Are they asking about how often you travel or what else you'd be using your phone for, right? Very simple stuff. But when we started to evaluate how likely the person who's evaluating would be to buy and correlating that to whether or not the sales rep physically gave them the handset to hold and try for themselves. The data was very compelling. It went from no, they didn't hand it to me, I was 25% likely to buy, to yes, they handed it to me, I was 75% likely to buy on average, right? So we had a 50% jump in the data on likelihood to buy. And why was that? It was because of one little process change. Now it sounds kind of easy and simple, but it's way deeper than you think because humans, you've probably heard the idea that humans humans learn in multiple ways. We learn from visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, right? Well, we buy in those ways too. So when
Buying
our
is kind of learning, depending on what it is that you're buying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So when we're in our buying process, our if we flip it, we're selling, our buyers are buying in their process. They are visually absorbing information so we can give them charts, graphs, we can give them data, whatever. We can tell them, which is often what salespeople are expected to do only, is just talk. And so that appeals to the auditory, but then kinesthetic, so that tactile experience with our product or service is, it really takes it to the next level. They need to feel it, and then they will more likely buy, because people buy on emotion. They justify it intellectually, right? They justify it with data, but the actual decision to buy happens emotionally. So anytime we can give them an opportunity to touch or feel our product, and I know a lot of people are saying, but Carrie, I sell a service. How I can't get them to touch it. No, probably not. But you can do little things like exercises. Is there a sort of an experiential exercise they can do to feel what it's like to use your product or service? And if not, the simple act of writing, if you get them writing or drawing, it will enhance the experience. So it could be something simple like draw a line on your piece of paper. Tell me about where you are today. Now put a timeline over here in 60 days. What would you like to see happen by that point? And then they're writing down their dreamy state in 60 days, and it makes it tactile. So you're engaging all of the senses. Really important in sales. And it's funny, people are always asking me for like tricks or tips or what's the best way to sell, what's the best thing to say. And it's like, well, there's no trick, right? But we can enhance the experience for the other human on the other side of it, because right now we're still selling to humans. And improve our chance of success if we can work with the brain and remove some of the friction that exists in the sales process.
I
Yeah.
love that. And I think so, tying it back to that tug of war of your executive team and your finance and accounting team versus
Mhm.
sales, you said to create the process could be efficient and as quick as 4 to 8 weeks. But
Sure.
then there's that time it takes for the change management and the tweaking and the learning and making it like a habit and an actual process, which
Mhm.
could vary a lot depending on the complexity of that process or the
Mhm.
organization or how deep their old habits are or what have you, right? So when you add that all up, I think oftentimes we're looking at as an outsider at a sales team and wondering like, so where are the sales? But when you
Yes.
think about what you just said, and I think that's great for all of us to remember, like if you're recreating a process, then you're implementing that process and doing the change management, the training, the tweaking, and then it's the successful process that's going to result in sales. It could be a while before you see some fruit of your labor. It might not be overnight, right? And
Yeah.
that's important for us to remember because obviously we'd rather be overnight. So would the salespeople, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, and there's a few factors to look at there. So yes, there's behavior change. And let's say it's something simple like you change CRMs or you start using a CRM because you didn't even have one before. PS, please don't use spreadsheets, you guys. Don't ask your salespeople to use spreadsheets. It's way too much work. But yeah, CRM. So let's say you choose a CRM, it integrates with your ERP, it integrates with everything, whatever you need it to. And yeah, it manages your marketing campaigns, et cetera. Maybe it's HubSpot, maybe it's something else, right? I have lots that I could recommend. But when you implement that, there's the learning curve, first of all, right? I have to learn how to use the tool. So there's that. And then now I have to change from here's how I used to do it. I have to now remember to start using it. And then the hard part is the leader has to hold them accountable to doing that. And then pulling reporting from the CRM and saying, hey, guys, if it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen. So you have to enter it. And then there's actually getting traction from that, right? So having reminders like, okay, I talked to Jamie today, we had a prospect or we had a discovery meeting, and she told me that she would be able to have more information for me in 3 weeks. So I set a reminder for myself in 3 weeks to call her. And then I reach out. And so then you're in, now you're using it and you're in the process of selling and moving opportunities along. And so the second layer of this is for most of you in B2B environments, your selling cycle could be 12 to 52 weeks, maybe even longer. And so you have that part of it to see the results of what you've been doing. So some changes that you implement in your sales process might be helpful at the very beginning of the sales process, and then you're going to see traction quicker. But some of them might be more effective towards the end of the sales process. So then you're not going to see much change until you get more deals that are close to closing. So that, it's all about the context of what that change is.
Yeah, no, and that's good reminders that these things generally take some time to
Mhm.
pay off for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Actually, I can show you an example as well. There's a company that I started working with. Um, here's the sort of chart. And their sales process was about 12 weeks on average. So from hello to signed deal usually was around 12 weeks. And so they had a sales target that was consistent throughout the time that we were working together. And I essentially stepped in as their fractional sales manager, reporting to the CEO. And their concern at that time was they had two sales reps who were somewhat consistently hitting target, and the rest of the team wasn't. So the changes that we made were uh, consistent use of CRM, consistent coaching calls, accountability calls. So with me, right? Like weekly talking to this each individual member of the sales team and asking about activity, looking through their CRM, asking about client meetings. What challenges are you having with those client meetings? What is your strategy? What are you doing next? And uh, and then debriefing those sales meetings after they happened. And so, just a little ninja tip for those of you leaders who are managing salespeople. When you're debriefing a call with a client that you weren't at, the best question you can ask them is, how did it end? Forget about how did the call go? How was the meeting? Because they're going to go, oh yeah, we have a great relationship, and we have a really good shot. It's 90% of my sales funnel. We're going to get it, boss. Well, that might be true, or it might not be, but I know that if I ask the sales rep, hey, how did the meeting end? I'm going to find out, was there a clear next step? What is the outcome that the client agreed to? Not just that you have high hopes that is going to happen. And then you know whether or not it's on track. And if their answer is, I'm not really sure, they told me to call in 3 months, great. Your next question can be, why 3 months? What's happening in 3 months that's different from today? So always ask about the end of the meeting, because that's usually what matters. And so with this client, I implemented those changes with the CEO's partnership as well and support internally. And we saw their profits. So this is not revenue, this is their margin. And we saw their revenue go up well above the sales target, which we knew was achievable, right? It wasn't set just dart on a dartboard. And we then saw it level off at about that level, and it continued after this. This is 2020 and 2021, so kind of COVID times. And so that's the change that we saw there. Do you want me to go into process, Jamie, while I'm
Yeah,
here?
let's do that.
Okay.
I'll go off screens for you.
Okay, awesome. So I talked about mapping the process, and the thing I want you guys to think about looking at is wherever you see friction in your sales process. And so what do I mean by that? I had a client who sold heating and ventilation systems, and they were like building projects, right? And restoration projects. And they noticed that their clients would order now for a project 4 or 6 months out. And then what happened quite often, so I'm not talking about a 1% type risk, it was like a 20% risk. 1 month before the order was supposed to go through, they would either push the project out and finally let their supplier know. Maybe they knew already, but they wouldn't say anything until a month before, or they would simply cancel because maybe they found something better or whatever the reason was. Long story short, they had a logistical nightmare with this because they would have product available earmarked for that client. And now suddenly it was not sold. And so therefore they had to find another customer for it, kind of scrambling. And also they had cash flow issues. So sure, finance would love for the client to always prepay, right? But at $100,000 to $300,000, these units it wasn't realistic to ask them to prepay. Um, and so they also weren't getting paid from their clients until after the project had started or even after it ended. So they would push back on that. The other option was a deposit, maybe, and a payment schedule. And so that is eventually what they did because they had friction in their process when it came to payment. So if you look at where you have friction, that is the best place to look for adding process. And I'm never a fan of process for the sake of process. We always want to have something that absolutely makes sense. We can look at sales and marketing because I have a lot of experience with this one. You might see this all the time, right? Like sales complaining, marketing isn't giving us enough qualified leads. And so it sounds like an excuse, right? Like, whatever, just go find your own leads. But then marketing complains about sales and they're like, well, we're giving them leads, but they're not closing them. So you have that friction in the process. So this is where process can definitely help. And so when we're defining sales process, I mentioned that we should start with the buyer's journey. We can make this as complex or as simple as you want it to be. So I'll show you an example of one that's very complex. I do not expect you to read all of this, but what I'll highlight is buyer's process is on the top, seller's process is on the bottom, and then we have the checkpoints are lining up. What are each one responsible for and what do we need to know? And usually there's some sort of naming convention so that we're all on the same page and we know what we're talking about. So that's an example. You can make it really simple. It can be like, we have a prospect, we're going to qualify them. You know, we might do some research or something like that. We're going to pitch, we're going to handle objections or negotiate a deal, and we're going to close it. Done. So don't make it more complicated than it needs to be, but the only thing I would give advice on is to define it very clearly along the way so that everybody, when you say it's a qualified lead, does everyone agree that that's a qualified lead and what is that based on? There should be some sort of checklist or some sort of criteria that everyone's very clear on. All right. So I'll pause there because I was talking a lot. Jamie, does that make sense to you? And we can go into other questions as well.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the other side of the friction, which is marketing and sales. And certainly, you had that whole PowerPoint list of all the sales processes or
Yeah.
sales activities, I should say. But then like there's a whole nother part at the top of the funnel for marketing,
Mhm.
certainly. And so really important for those not in marketing or sales to recognize that the list of activities to get us to that ink or contract or revenue is pretty long for most entities, right? And it's not
Mhm.
short. Um, anything else to mention on that marketing sales conflict and how people should look at that if they're sitting in finance, accounting, or an executive seat?
Yeah, I think, well, we'll talk about investment as well. So when I think about investment in sales and marketing, I think that some of the conflict comes up because they're incented on different things. So marketing often is tasked. They're usually salaried employees, right? They're overhead, I guess you would call it, but they are targeted or incented on things like click-through rates, your search engine results, how many leads came in through the website, and all of that. So those things can definitely be quantified, and it's valuable to quantify them because the more data we have, the more we can start to dissect where is the process breaking down. But then sales is generally commission or bonused on what's closed. And if we only look at revenue, which is the easiest way to do it, and that's why most companies do it, sometimes we're missing one of the components. And you mentioned it earlier about closing deals that aren't even profitable. In fact, maybe you had to pay for the business, to get that banner. And if that's a strategic decision, cool. I'm not judging. But often if we can pull in a profitability component, then we're going to be happier with the results across the organization. And we're going to be then able to share that profit with other employees who contributed to getting those deals, right? Because it's definitely a team effort. Any salesperson who said, I did it all by myself is probably not correct, right? That might happen once in a while, but the reality is it's a team effort, and we have to have a great website. We have to have lead gen. We have to have content, things like that from marketing, and we have to invest in that. And then on the sales side, we have to have somebody who's able to move those deals through to close. And so if you need to incent based on revenue alone, that's fine to do that, but then give some structure around pricing. So put some guardrails in place to say, okay, you can't go any lower than this, don't go any higher than this, which is probably a moving target, but somewhere in the middle is maybe acceptable. Yeah.
Right. I love it. Anyone else that has questions, please make sure to type them in the chat, and I'll ask Carrie. Wanted to go back on the every person is in sales comment. So
Oh,
that's an
okay.
interesting discussion for sure. And I want to talk a bit about that. So we do say, at an executive level, especially if you're sitting at an executive table and you don't see your role as advocating in the community, in the market for the business that you are part of, then I'm pretty idealistic about some things, and I would just argue then you're not executive.
Mm.
And so, we talk about that even when we're placing CFOs in permanent roles and temporary roles, and of course our own employees as fractional, is that ultimately you are a salesperson, an advocate, a representative of those businesses,
Mhm.
because you're a part of the executive. But it's interesting because I don't know if everybody shares that perspective of leadership. And your comment was even more broad because you said everyone in the entire organization, which
Mhm.
implied at all levels and all desks and all seats.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to talk a bit about that, and how that shows up. So, one of my favorite things, and I guess I was theoretically in sales, I guess I was at a big four. And I remember I got this weird phone call, and this lady, a friend of mine, she's like, "Okay, Jamie, I'm finally gonna buy." I'm like, "Oh, what are you gonna buy?" I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna buy this system from you." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that I tried to sell that to you." She's like, "What do you mean? You're always talking about it." And
Yeah.
so it was a fun example because it actually was one of the biggest projects I ever sold at that big four job. And all I did was go out for drinks and shoot the shit and just talk about something that I thought was amazing that we were providing in the market.
Yeah.
I believed in it, and I was using my spare time and my fun time just to talk about it. I
Mhm.
absolutely in no way was trying to sell. But I think it was a good learning for me because it did end up being one of the biggest projects I ever sold at the firm. And it started out as me just advocating and representing something that I believed in. And I wasn't trying to
Mhm.
sell. I swear to God, I was having wine and throwing F bombs and being stupid, but also advocating and selling this
Yeah.
product, right? I mean, it was a moment that made me realize that, like, first of all, you should want to be in a job where you can be excited and talk about what you're selling or
Yeah.
representing or value, but also that it can pay off, right? And it can be really lucrative and exciting that
Mhm.
you have that opportunity. That's a great part of our jobs as leaders or as people.
Mhm.
So want to hear a bit about that and the organizations that you see do this well and the ones that struggle.
Okay. So first of all, I want to comment on, I love that you're saying you were just drinking wine and like, making conversation and dropping F-bombs because you,
Yeah, I really wasn't selling.
no, no, but that's not selling, right? Like
Yeah,
you being yourself is sometimes the best sales tool that you can possibly have because everybody buys from people they trust and love. Maybe not love, like, right?
right.
We don't buy because you told me four features that you think should make me want to do business with you. We buy because we trust your opinion, we trust your judgment and your expertise, and we like you as a human being. We think that's somebody I want to do business with, right? The people who sell based on features and benefits or like pushing, right? Being pushy, if they get sales, it's in spite of that. It's not because of that. It's maybe good timing. Maybe they identified that that product really was the best, but that's not why you're buying. I'm sure we've all had those experiences where we knew we needed something. We had already done the research, which, by the way, most salespeople are up against buyers who are very educated. So the idea of a cold call is actually gone pretty much, right? Like most people know stuff about you before you even call. So, so all that to say that going back to your comment about everybody being in sales, that's why I started this session with the idea of what is sales not and what is sales. Because if you believe that sales is, I have to have a flashy pitch and I have to say the perfect thing and I have to whatever, that's not what it's about. We attract people who have a need that we can serve. And when we use those, like being a real human being, talking to another human being type techniques, we are going to attract clients who want to do business with us first and foremost. And then when we can actually meet their need, they'll be like, okay, yes, let's actually do the deal. So executives represent the company. Do they move the deal through the process? Maybe not. It depends. They may delegate the opportunity, sort of like moving it through the pipeline to someone else and still stay involved at a senior leadership level or executive sponsor type level. In some organizations, they're actually negotiating strategic partnerships and strategic deals. So companies who do it well, I guess I hate to name names actually because
No, you
people
don't
are
have to name
such
names, but just
yeah,
describe them.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So let me do it this way. So an organization that I worked with who they were quite large. So let me start there. They had a team of people who would hunt new business and negotiate large contracts. So large B2B contracts. They also had B2C contracts. So there was a different team for that. And then once deals were signed, they went to an account management team. The handoff was so smooth and clean. Typically, by the time the deal was being negotiated in contract phase, the account manager already started to get involved. So they knew the client's needs, they knew their concerns, they knew everything that was negotiated and why that was a point of negotiation. Um, and so that background is something, sure, you can type that out in a CRM, but being involved is obviously a little more intimate and gives you better knowledge. Um, the executives also would negotiate strategic deals with partners in either adjacent territories or with suppliers who could refer business to them. So they were salespeople don't generally get involved in who's going to be a supplier, right? So that's usually executive team, but they would arrange it so that it also fed leads to the company. So them being a distributor, they would just be a preferred kind of distributor. So that's when it's been done really well. Where it's been done really not well, Oh my goodness, there's some train wreck stories. Um, I worked with a company who initially, before they started working with myself and a partner, they didn't even know that they should one train their sales reps. So their sales reps went out and they were like dialing for dollars basically and trying to close people on the very first call, like, oh, you don't want to do business with us? Oh, and they would hang up. But they would let it go. And so there was no continuity in, okay, I had a first conversation with you. It's a no for now. I'm going to call you back in 6 months when maybe things have changed. They would just let the whole list die, which was the first challenge I saw. And second, the leader had never sold, which, by the way, is okay. I work with lots of technology and engineering companies who are very like knowledge heavy going into it and haven't sold. But this leader also had no empathy for their seller and just essentially wanted the delivery of output. So where's the deal? Where's the deal? Why haven't you had a meeting? Um, where's the contract? And there was no coaching going on. So it was all about productivity. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, it's an emotional job. So that person didn't last very long. And then the next person was treated the same over and over and over again. They had 6 people turnover in a year and a half, and clients started to drop like flies as well. So when we went in to fix it, it was first of all, you need 2 sellers because there's too much activity for one person. You need training, you need a CRM so that there's continuity of information. You need to call up, this took bravery, call up all your old clients and ask them why they don't do business with you anymore. And then take the feedback. Don't expect that they're going to come back because they probably won't. But take the feedback and apply that to every new contract that you sell going forward because you need to fix those mistakes. Otherwise, you're going to develop a terrible reputation in the marketplace. And they kind of did. It was not pretty. So
And all at that relationship between the leader and the sales is was at the root of a lot of that. It
that
sounds
was, yeah, it was, I mean, there were other things
right.
going on too, but yeah, it's never that simple. But yeah, the leader not having the empathy for what it was like in the job or understanding for what was involved, it was very detrimental to the success of the company.
I think that like that raises a good point for the business leaders and the CPAs on the call too, is like you talked about it earlier too, that holding sales teams accountable and how critical
Yeah.
that is. And the I can't remember the words you used in terms of the accountability calls and the coaching calls and putting
Hmm.
those things into the process. And I think that's an interesting point because, like, when you're talking about the accountability and the coaching, we're not talking about accountability being revenue or profit or that lagging indicator or the final,
Right.
awesomeness. You're talking about the process and the other
Yeah.
milestones and numbers that get you there. And, I think it's a good thing to point out is like, if you're trying to grow a business and you've got your salespeople and you've got your executives or what have you, who's holding those salespeople accountable? And let me tell you, it's kind of a thankless job. Like when we promoted David to CGO and I didn't have to be the chief growth officer, like I was so happy not to have to do that. I hated holding people accountable, like at that granular level. Like I was really bad at it too. But I also
I
hated it.
doubt
Like
it.
I hate it. I hate it. Like I like coaching and talking about the how the meeting ended and that part of what you're talking about. But like
Hmm.
actually having to like check if it's in CRM or looking at the numbers, it's like
Yeah.
my worst nightmare. And so, if you're thinking about the business you're in, who is holding that person accountable and do they have that skill set and are they putting that time in? Because a lot of business owners are like me and they hate that. So guess what? They do a bad job or they don't do it. Well,
Hmm.
that's not going to result well for the company and the sales team, right? You need someone to do that. And, it might not be that visionary business owner or that engineer who started a business because he or she's so friggin' bright and has IP that's like
Right.
worth so much money. Like that person's probably not going to be good at holding a sales team accountable. The
Mm-mm.
visionary, crazy entrepreneur is not going to be probably good at holding the sales team accountable.
Mm-mm.
Probably not going to be the CFO because they have other things going on, though they'd probably be good at it a lot of times. But like figuring that all out is
Yeah.
important, I think. And sometimes it's not clear and the expectations on that aren't, part of the roles and responsibilities. Everyone just thinks these people, well, we hired experienced salespeople, so, they should get the
They'll
work
do it.
done. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also human beings and they're not perfect. And so, we might hire salespeople who, and by the way, when we're building a sales team, and I didn't show a slide, which I don't really have anything interesting, it was just bullet points. So we want to really create a profile of who or what kind of person is going to be successful in the role that we need. So think about the role first. What do we want to see happen? What is the outcome we want to see? And I know it's sales. Like, don't get me wrong, it's obviously it's sales. But how does that need to happen? Is it the kind of person who needs to do public speaking like this? Well, that's a different skill set from someone who's maybe a technician and needs to do needs analysis with another set of software to know whether or not they're compatible. Totally different skill set, right? So look at what are the skills that's required. Is it someone who's going to have that hello conversation and talk to strangers? Or is it someone who is going to take existing relationships within the industry and then become I mean, not become friends, that's for lack of a better term, become friends, build relationships, and um, acquire introductions to others in the industry and work that way? Is it just somebody who needs to close the deals that come in because maybe you have really good lead gen, right? All very different skill sets. And so defining that first is going to help. Then you put together the qualities of, okay, what are our values? Does this person's values align with us? Because that can create friction with the rest of the team in the organization, which then contributes to the we hate sales. Those guys suck. Well, of course they suck because you hired them in a way that you would never hire for anybody else in the organization. So really important to make sure that all of that is aligned. Um, what else was I going to say about that? Let's see. Yeah, building your sales team. Oh, and the other piece is what you talked about with accountability. Don't give the accountability to somebody who doesn't have the authority. So where I've seen this go wrong is in some organizations, they have a sales coordinator who's in charge of managing all of the CRM data, pulling reports, sending reports to leaders, sending reports to all the sales people at the end of the week or end of the month, whatever it is. And they're supposed to point out, here's the 10 clients that you haven't called in the last 30 days or 90 days. And cool. The sales rep's going to get the report and go, thanks, and probably not do anything with it because nobody who has the authority to either give them a performance improvement plan, affect their income, or make them lose their job is actually looking at it. It's just the sales coordinator. So, and I say just in the most respectful way because they do a ton of work, but they
Right.
don't have the authority to affect the person's job. So, really important to make sure the authority's there.
I love that. So, we talked about it a bit already, but like salespeople get fired a lot, right? And so I've got one son who's like, I think he's going to be really good looking man someday. Right now he's like a teenager, but and he's charming and he gets along with people. So there's a part of me that wants to push him towards sales because I really think that it would be an amazing career for him. But then there's another part that, well, first of all, if I push him towards anything, that'll be the last thing he does. So I got to be careful. And then second of all, salespeople get fired so often that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to push him towards a career where he's constantly getting fired. So we talked a bit about one of the reasons salespeople get fired is that the expectations of how long it's going to take to get results are misaligned with reality. So people get fired before the fruits of their labor even happen, right? And so I've seen that in lots of clients where people get fired and they didn't really have enough time to let a process breathe or even see whether it worked.
Mhm.
Obviously, someone once told me, Jamie, you're always going to fire salespeople faster and more often because if they can't even sell to you in the interview, then they're a really bad salesperson. So I thought that was
Yes.
amusing and funny and made me feel better
Mm.
about life. So that there's probably some truth to that. And then I've also seen, and this was like, devastating. It happened to a close person in my life where the sales team got let go, and they got let go because they killed it, right? They just way outblew all the stretch goals, all of the expectations. And then the business looked at it and was like, we can't afford to pay that bonus. Like when we set that up, we had no expectation of actually that cash outflow ever happening. So then
Mm,
they fired the sales team and end up in court because, but the thing
mm,
is, all bonuses are management discretion. So who knows? I don't know what the court case ended up being, but basically they fired the salespeople so as to not pay because the
mhm.
salespeople earned every single uptake and every single bonus that was on the employment agreement, and there was never an intention to pay that, right? And then when they had to pay it, they're like, that's too much money. So I've seen them fail because they don't have time to succeed. Seen them get fired because they succeed too much. And then of course there's the normal reasons that any employee gets fired too, on
Yeah.
top of all of that. So like, if you're speaking to the executives and the CPAs that are on this call and are quick to want to fire, you're too expensive or you're not showing results. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And
Mm.
you obviously have friends in sales. I'm
Oh yeah.
sure you I'm sure you've been fired. I haven't met a salesperson in my life that hasn't been fired ever.
Well, I did. Okay. The only
You
sales
are, that's
job.
amazing.
No, I haven't, but I haven't been fired for a B2B sales job. I have been fired for a retail sales job early in my career. But that I was like 17, so I kind of just don't worry about that one. But
Yeah.
no, I get what you're saying. So the thing with hiring salespeople, you mentioned so many things. So there's a few factors that are, again, that 1%, like end of the bell curve kind of stuff that you don't know if it's going to come up, let alone would your salesperson ever know that it's going to come up. So the first thing I always say is take your time when you're hiring. So before you ever hire them, take your time in that process because there's a few things that you can do to set yourself up for success. I talked about defining the role very clearly. What are the qualities you're looking for? So not just they need to have 5 years experience and a degree. Okay, great. Are they, is community service important to you? Like if that's one of your values, make sure that that's in there. Um, do they follow up with you? Do they do their research? I ask every salesperson I interview, what made you want to apply for this role? What about the role or company made you want to apply? That's the question. And if they can't demonstrate research in their response, bye bye, you're out. Because every salesperson in their role in prospecting needs to do research. So if you can't even research the job when I'm about to maybe hand you a paycheck, well, it's not likely that you're going to do a good job of doing that when you're prospecting with clients. So, um, so that's one of them. And then throughout the throughout the interview process, you can also have them role play. You can ask them if, let's say you got this job, let's fast forward 30 days. I'm somebody you meet at a dinner party, and I ask you, hey, Jamie, what do you do? What are you going to say? And I have them tell me in plain English because they don't have to know the company really, really well or the value story really, really well to tell me at a dinner party what they do for a living. And
Right.
if they say, if their answer is, I'm in sales for Amplify Advisors, that's it? Come on. Like, give me more than that, right? And then the other thing we can do is role play of like, let's pretend I'm a client and I've told you that, I don't know, whatever insert problem that you experience or you hear from your clients all the time. I have delivery issues and I need delivery within 48 hours of order. And obviously that sounds tight to me, depending on what it is, but right, unless you're Amazon. So that's one way that you can also test them through the process. I would also have peer interviews. So have somebody else on the team who's either in sales, or if your team is smaller, then somebody like adjacent to sales. Meet with them before they accept the job, because they're going to divulge, and give them the questions, give the team member the questions that they should ask. So I have team members ask things like, tell me, I'm sure there was a time when you struggled to hit target or you missed target. How did you handle that? They're going to give a team member a very different answer than they will give you as a leader. So those are the kinds of things that I insert into the interview process. So then now let's say we've agreed we're going to work together. You would bring them on. The firing. Oh my goodness. So there's so many reasons that you might want to fire, but there's so many ways that you can get out in front of it before it has to happen. So making your expectations really clear. Yes, they have a sales target. What would contribute to success in getting to that target? So let's say your target is, I don't know, $2 million for the year. What's your average deal size? If it's $500,000, well, okay, you need 4 deals, right? But how many meetings does it take? And how many prospects do you have to talk to get those 4 deals? It might be a 10 times multiplier. Like our sort of sales 101 calculation is, to get to a deal, it's kind of 10 times. So you have to have had 10 meetings or 10 initial conversations, not meetings, like with the same person, 10 unique decision maker conversations. But for some companies, that conversion is higher or lower. So you have to look at your own data to find out what that is. So then I can look at that. If I back that up and I talk to my seller about, okay, you need 10 meetings to get to that one deal. Who are you talking to? How are you planning out those meetings? What do you have next week? Because it's so predictable. If you think about your cash flow, if you have one meeting next week and one meeting the week after, but you should really have 5 each week, in 12 weeks, your cash flow is going to suffer,
Right. Yeah.
right? So it's so predictable. So I always look at those leading indicators, which is generally meetings, calls, whatever the activity is that you define. And I gave you that list. So you have that list of activity that they should probably be engaged in for your business. You might scratch some of them off and say, no, that doesn't apply to us, but that's fine. You have to define that up front. And a new sales rep should be told what are those activities that are going to lead to the most success, not you tell me, you define it. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? I just started. I need an onboarding plan. So just give them some guidelines. Sure, over time they're going to test and learn, but give them some guidelines on what you expect as far as the level of activity, and that'll help. And then they
Awesome.
won't be surprised. Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up soon. If anyone has final questions, let me know. And then Carrie, I'm going to go to you in a minute to let us know anything that we haven't touched on that we should. But before I do that, I just want to remind everybody that Nikki put in the chat the registration opportunities. So we've got live with AHA on February 26th. So limited seats, because we're going to do the table discussions like we did last time. Really good feedback on that. A bit chaotic, but fun, and a different way to do CPD. So if you'd like to attend in person, please register on February 26th. And of course, plan to come whether it's this cold or nice by then, because it could be anything, who knows. As mentioned, non-Amplify event, but I'm selfishly promoting if you're 2003, 4, or 5 UFI writer, I'd love to see you at the MPAC reunion, because 20 years is not a small feat in my opinion. So let's get together. We've got a lunch and learn on March 6th. So that's an opportunity to see the Acumatica project modules in action. So especially relevant for anyone that does projects, but construction, energy services, and professional services would be the most frequent use of these modules. Really exciting to be able to show that software for a lunch and learn on March 6th. And on March 18th, our third Tuesday of March, it's the power of strategic planning and why it's a game changer. So excited to touch on strategy again. We love to do that at least once a year. So Any other questions? Let me know. Carrie, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure that everybody heard, or some slides that we didn't get to because we got tied up in our conversation?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. There is one other aspect I'll talk about that we kind of touched on it, but tools for the job. So when we talk about investing in sales, we want to give the team everything they need to be the most successful they possibly can. And often that has to do with technology, right? Like if they need an iPad, like in this image, to demonstrate or to build quotes on the spot or whatever the case may be, then that's something that we should provide. And, I've heard lots of stories. I had a client during COVID, they were a medical device manufacturer, and traditionally they went out to medical offices and would demonstrate the devices and show them exactly how it worked. But during COVID, of course, that wasn't possible. And so the sales manager at the time said, well, what if we created a video studio in our office and we could recreate what it looks like in a doctor's office and then have video cameras all over the place and zoom in? And they were like, great, how much is that going to cost? And they were like, $18,000 easily. Okay, that's a lot of money. Well, it sounds like a lot of money until you look at how much they were spending to travel at that time. And they were typically spending about $18,000 just on airport parking and probably over $120,000 in travel. So it became a really easy ROI calculation to say, yeah, we're going to spend 18K. The happy byproduct of that was they started recording the videos, and then those became evergreen content pieces that they could send out to prospects after the fact to say, hey, if you want a refresher or you want a review, here's how you use it. Or they could train their like medical assistant staff very easily without pulling them away from patients when the sales rep was available, kind of thing. So there was that. And when we talk about tools for the job, we want to minimize the amount of admin that sales reps are doing because their success is dependent on the amount of time that they can spend with customers. It really is. It's like a straight line. So CRM is good, but not onerous fields that don't matter, right? The software companies include a whole bunch of interesting information. Interesting is great, but it can be too much. And so don't require that your team fill out every little field. Really, really pare it down to what's actually required. So please no spreadsheets. I'll just leave it at that. And then I highly recommend using things like LinkedIn Navigator. There's lots of companies that out there that have lists. So like Apollo AI or Apollo IO is a really good one. Zoom Info is great. You can use things like Vidyard for creating videos. So if you're wondering how to do that, you simply say like, hi, Jamie. I really appreciate that you booked some time with me. I thought I'd put a face to the name. I'm really looking forward to seeing you next Friday. So as simple as that can help personalize the interaction and make it more compelling and decrease your ghost rate. So, our prospects will become a ghost when we want to meet with them if they don't know who we are. So we want to personalize whenever we can. Things like Teams and Zoom are, of course, good. I think most organizations are investing in video technology because it makes a lot of sense and it's very cheap. Creating professional explainer videos or demos. People are consuming the world on video these days. If you're not creating videos, I would suggest that you want to consider doing it. It puts you behind potentially your competitors, and again, personalization matters. There's things, meeting management. What I mean by that is using things like in HubSpot or Salesforce, they have scheduling tools. You can also use Calendly. I use that personally. So things like that. And then giving marketing the resources to make templates for presentations, brochures, proposals will just save time and add consistency. So If you don't have a marketing team, that's okay. Just buy an annual subscription to Canva. They have tons of templates in there that people can use and make really professional quality. If anyone's a graphic designer on here, I apologize. You're probably hating me mentioning Canva, but it's an amazing tool. So I really love it. I think that's it. So I'll just share my contact info is if anybody has more questions or you just want, I don't know, you have a problem that you're facing right now and you want some additional support, feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So definitely connect with me and you can just send me an email as well if that's easier. So
Awesome. Yeah, leave that up for a couple seconds if you could, Carrie, and we will send out the deck as well. So you'll, if you don't catch it right now, you can expect to see her contact information in our follow-up email as well. I really appreciate this, Carrie. I think it's really important because obviously at the end of the day, if we're not selling, then we're not growing a business or even surviving as a business. And so it's important for us to have a real conversation about that part of the business and that department and those players and make sure that everyone has a healthy respect for what's happening there. Because if you're not part of it, you might take for granted how easy it is or that it's all parties and events and fun, which is a lot of work, by the way, going to those parties and events and fun.
yeah.
So don't take any of that for granted. I love it. So it's been really useful. I think everyone's probably learned a lot and hopefully they'll follow up with you as well. Carrie does do fractional sales and helps businesses set up that process and those teams. So if you know of a business that really needs to break a ceiling in terms of their revenue and sales and needs that leadership, Carrie would be a really great choice for you to look at introducing. So thank you very much and have a great day, everyone. Hopefully we see you at one of the many things coming up that will bring some light and spirit into the end of February, March as we suffer through the cold and the winter. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Have a great day, everyone.